camp. Going to Rome meant that Cassius would have to fly. There was one problem. The powerful boxer was afraid to fly. Joe Martin worked hard to convince his young student to fly to Rome. Cassius did not take chances, however. He bought a parachute to wear on the airplane. After arriving safely, he soon became a familiar sight among the world's athletes. The energetic young man was thrilled to see everyone. Staying in the Olympic Village in Rome, he visited with athletes from dozens of countries. He wanted to meet everyone he could, mostly to talk about himself. Talking was something that Cassius was very good at. Even as a teenage boxer, he had not been afraid to boast about his skills. This was very different than many athletes, and certainly black athletes. Some white American fans did not appreciate black people who spoke up or spoke out. Cassius didn't care. He was loud, funny, and proud. Cassius liked to brag and he liked to box. He battled men from Belgium, Russia, and Australia. Each was a difficult fight, but Cassius won them all. He had a unique way of expressing himself, and he had a unique style in the ring. Unlike many fighters, he danced, shuffled, and moved around. Most fighters stood their ground and tried to overpower their opponents. Cassius could hit, but he was very good at avoiding hits too. He seemed to be playing a role or acting out a certain part until his powerful fists connected with big punches. His final Olympic match for the light heavyweight gold medal for fighters up to 178 pounds was his toughest yet. Cassius faced Zbigniew Pietrzakowski from Poland, who had been champion of Europe 3 times and had fought in the 1956 Olympics. The Polish fighter was older, bigger, and stronger. The first 2 rounds were about even. In the third round, Cassius gave the Polish boxer a bloody nose and landed many blows. When the judges scored the fight, Cassius was named the winner. The kid from Louisville had earned an Olympic gold medal. Clay returned to the United States, still talking and still wearing his gold medal. He toured New York City, shaking hands with everyone he met. Then he returned to a welcome home event in Louisville. At the ceremony in Louisville, he read a poem he had written. Such poems would become a well-known part of his personal style. To make America the greatest is my goal, so I beat the Russian and I beat the Pole. Not everyone in town was so excited by his success. Even in 1960, some people still were not happy to see a black person getting so much attention. Cassius had represented America in Rome, but he said that even though he had a gold medal, some people were still calling him boy. That word was a great insult to a black man. Cassius did not let such prejudice slow him down. He knew that his next big step was to become a professional. To this point, as an amateur, he had not been paid for any of his fights. He had to be an amateur to fight in the Olympics. But with the games behind him, it was time to move up. He wanted to buy a car for his parents and to help Rudy, who was also training to be a boxer. Boxing can be expensive. A fighter has to hire trainers and assistants, rent gyms, and travel to fights. He only gets paid when he fights. To get the money he needed, Cassius signed a deal with a group of businessmen. They agreed to pay for his training for 5 years in return for a percentage of all the money he won. They also gave him a bonus just for signing with them. One of the first things Cassius did with that money was to hire Angelo Dundee to be his trainer. Dundee remembered meeting Cassius back in Louisville. He had watched the young fighter's progress and thought he could help him become a better boxer. After his Olympic success, Cassius had a new goal, to be heavyweight champion of the world. He knew he needed Dundee's help. Another thing Cassius did with the bonus was buy his parents a new pink Cadillac. In 1960, when he was 18 years old, Cassius moved to Miami, where Dundee ran a gym. With this support, Cassius went from amateur to professional and kept winning just as he always had. He kept talking, too. Though he was new to professional boxing, he boasted that he would win every bout. He started predicting how many rounds the fight would last, and he was usually right. He said this before a 1963 match with Doug Jones. Jones likes to mix, so I'll let it go 6. If he talks jive, I'll cut it to 5, and if he talks some more, I'll cut it to 4. Clay's loud, fast talk and bragging earned him a new nickname, the Louisville Lip. But he knew about an old saying in sports: it's not bragging if you can back it up. Chapter 3, King of the World. For the next several years, Cassius trained full-time in Miami with Dundee. He also kept winning. Cassius won 8 fights in 1961 and 6 in 1962. He didn't lose one fight. All the while, his trainer was impressed by how hard Cassius worked, just as Joe Martin had been. During some of his rare time away from the training gym, Cassius became friends with Sam Saxon, who was part of the Nation of Islam. I was training for a fight, Ali said, and met a follower of Elijah Muhammad named Captain Sam. He invited me to a meeting, and after that, my life changed. Elijah Muhammad was the leader of the Nation of Islam. This religious movement was for Black Americans only. It believed that Black and white people should be separate. Its members also followed some of the beliefs of Islam, an ancient religion that started in the Middle East. People who follow Islam are called Muslims. Nation of Islam. Islam is a religion that was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad in the 7th century in what is now Saudi Arabia. People who believe in Islam are called Muslims. The faith spread rapidly in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. Today, more than 1.5 billion people around the world follow Islam. The Nation of Islam, NOI, is different. It was founded by Wallace D. Fard in Detroit in 1930. Fard disappeared in 1934, and a man who called himself Elijah Muhammad took over leadership of the group. Many of the beliefs of the Nation of Islam mirror those of other Muslims, such as calling God Allah, praying 5 times a day, and not eating pork or drinking alcohol. Fard and Muhammad added other ideas. They taught that Black people are all descended from another, earlier race that had been split apart by white people. Elijah Muhammad told his followers that white people were the enemy. This made him unpopular not only with whites but with Blacks who were working for equality. Elijah Muhammad died in 1975. His son, Warith Deen, took his place as the leader of the Nation of Islam and softened many of its views. He changed the group's name to the Al-Islam in the West. Today, a different group, not connected with Warith Deen Muhammad, uses the name Nation of Islam. Cassius talked with Sam Saxon and visited a mosque, which is an Islamic temple. Cassius had heard of the movement before. In high school, he had actually wanted to write an essay in English class about Black Muslims, but the teacher would not let him. As Cassius listened at the mosque, he thought about what he heard and became more interested. Meanwhile, Cassius moved up the heavyweight rankings. From 1960 through 1963, he fought 19 times and won every fight, most by knockout. His swaggering charm got him as much attention as his great fighting skills. He knew that getting attention in the press would bring more people to the fights, and more people in the audience meant that he would earn more money. Before each fight, he would entertain reporters and photographers, clowning and joking and showing off. Some writers and boxing fans didn't like how he was acting. Others thought he was fun to watch. He didn't care as long as they were paying attention. One of his inspirations was a professional wrestler called Gorgeous George. Like Cassius, George bragged often and loudly. He wore wild costumes, had long, curly blonde hair, and made outrageous claims. Cassius once met George before a fight in Las Vegas. The wrestler advised him to keep talking, make it an act, and the people will come. Cassius traveled to London to fight the great British champion Henry Cooper. He entertained the English press with his wild ways and taunts. He predicted he would beat Cooper in 5 rounds, and he did. Gorgeous George. Not many athletes have changed the world of sports, but George Wagner certainly did. Before George, athletes were not loud, colorful, controversial, or flashy. After George, athletes, starting with Muhammad Ali, knew that making headlines and attracting attention could help them famous Attention could help make them famous and maybe even make them rich. Wagner was a wrestler in the 1940s and 50s. He gave himself nicknames such as the Sensation of the Nation and most famously, Gorgeous George. He dyed his hair blonde and wore it in long curls. He wore colorful capes and boots. Beautiful music filled the arena as he arrived, and attendants sprayed perfume in the ring as Wagner entered and carried a silver mirror. Wrestling was one of the first sports to become popular on television, and Gorgeous George became the most famous professional wrestler of his time because of the way he entertained the crowds outside as well as inside the ring. His influence on sports and popular culture continues to this day. But underneath all the fun, Cassius still had a burning desire to be the champ. Finally, just one man stood in his way, Sonny Liston, who was then the world heavyweight champion. As good as Cassius was, most boxing experts thought Liston was much better. Liston had already beaten all of the other top fighters. He had one of the most powerful punches ever, and he was fearless in the ring. Cassius turned on his attention-getting skills. He called the champ a big, ugly bear. He parked a bus in front of Liston's home in Denver. The bus had a sign painted by Cassius's father. It said, "Liston must go in 8, meaning 8 rounds. At the weigh-in before the fight, Cassius pretended to be scared of Liston. "If he stands and fights, I'll kill him," Liston says. The fight between Cassius and Sonny Liston was finally held in Miami on February 25th, 1964. Even though almost no one thought Clay could win, he danced and moved and avoided the bigger man's punches. The 6th round ended, and Cassius danced back to his corner. He felt great, and Liston was breathing hard. Liston was in pain, and he did not come out for the 7th round. The fight was over. Cassius Clay had done what he had always said he would do. He was the heavyweight world champion. As he received his championship belt, fans knew they had seen one of the biggest upsets in the history of boxing. To the new champ, however, his victory was no surprise. Cassius leaped around the ring. He climbed the ropes and shook his fists in the air. "I am the greatest of all time. I'm the king of the world."